Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 98 for Monday, July 20th, 2020. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, also known as Pixel Riffs. Good day, sir.
Hello, and if you enjoy hearing about fireworks, not hearing the fireworks themselves, but hearing about them, we just had a pretty long conversation in the pre-show, the render distance, which you can get from patreon.com/thespawnchunks if you join our community of patrons, where, yeah, I feel like we're missing fireworks a little bit and not entirely certain if all the fireworks-based events around here are gonna happen, so I feel like some Minecraft firework displays might be coming up in the near future, but outside of that, we're feeling it a little bit. We'll see. Yeah, the render distance can be found at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And let's talk about what we've been up to in Minecraft this week.
I have been digging in the depths of the Nether. I have a new project that I've been working on, and it's an exercise in eating my hat, which is not happening, by the way. I've seen a lot of people talking about how much they like Blackstone in some of the YouTube videos that I consume, and I am confused by this because I do not hold the same opinion as some of you may or may not have realized. However, on the Citadel, where we updated to 1.16 and we have trimmed the chunks, we have about 100 blocks before you get to new chunks from the center of our Nether hub. So from the safety of the Nether hub, you can't just go mining for ancient debris right away because you're not going to find any because it doesn't generate in existing chunks. So it gave me an opportunity to build something. And I thought, well, it would be really neat to have like a netherite hall, something that's not made of netherite, but it's like where you go to get ready to then go hunt for ancient debris, netherite, blackstone, whatever you're mining for in the Nether at the bottom of the world. And as it's supposed to be perhaps an ancient structure, so I thought I'd try to use some of the new Nether blocks to experiment with them, learn how to use them and stuff like that, including blackstone. So I have been mining for blackstone and building with blackstone, and people that have been tuning into my streams have been just like, what's going on?
Yeah, who are you and what have you done with Joel? Yeah,
exactly. But no, I wanted to be able to not just look at this in a creative world, throwing it around in the overworld or the Nether, and just kind of like passing judgment on it without really trying to experiment with it and seeing what it can and cannot be used for. And as per our discussions on the show before, I've come up with the fact that it's basically a decent background block if you're talking about the basic blackstone, like not the other stuff that you make from it, just like the stuff that you mine into the ground. If you decide to place it back down again as a backdrop to a wall, like the black background or, something that has a little bit of texture, then it's actually not so bad. I don't mind the side texture of it as much as I thought I would. A lot of times when you're flying around in creative, you're usually high. And so when you're looking down at the top of blackstone, it looks remarkably like cobblestone, intentionally, I'm sure, as it tends to be able to blend in that way better. But it also has a lot more contrast on the top of it than it does on the side. And the side of it is much closer to obsidian. It has larger chunks, like larger stone textures in it. And it's also more subtle. So I've been able to use that in a couple different places. But honestly, I'm mostly using it as like lining a long drop down to the bottom of the world that you will pass by in seconds. I'm also using blackstone stairs at the very base of some pillars, and I am going to throw some images into our chat. You have them already, but some of our live listeners will be able to take a look at these and see what I'm doing. Now, I do have a custom black nether brick texture, which does help in some of these situations. But the blackstone I'm using is at the base of the pillars that I'm putting up. It's also in the background of some of the smaller images and smaller areas as like a background to a recess. Like you've got a wall of 100 blocks and you've got like little sections of 3 that you've got pillars in, and then I'm putting blackstone behind the pillars. So like it's really not even forefront. And in the Nether, it's so dark that you really can't see too much of it. And it does kind of give a nice texture in that way. I was surprised in working with it, how frustrated I was that it's not a directional block.
Yeah.
Because I would love to use it in the side texture in the same way that you can use basalt, right?
Yes, yeah, basalt is actually surprisingly versatile, even though there's only 2 variants of it. You can actually have it be placed in a variety of directions like logs, and we've remarked on the show before that it's more like a log than it is a stone type because of the directionality of it. And so Yeah, it is kind of frustrating at times when you can't do that with Blackstone. And it makes sense as well because there's certain formations in which Blackstone generates in the Nether that I think adding directionality to those would be kind of odd, but then I don't think Basalt doesn't generate sideways typically anyway, so I'm not certain quite why they decided not to give the directionality to Blackstone. But I guess it's kind of aping what stone does in a way because you don't really have rotational aspect to stone or stone bricks either. So giving that to Blackstone arbitrarily maybe feels like something they didn't want to do.
But the difference there is that stone and stone bricks have the same texture on all 6 sides.
It's true, yes.
Right. And that's where I was frustrated because I want to put a ceiling on this Nether hall, and I haven't decided what I want to put up there. It's it's underneath the lava lake, so what's really cool is that the ceiling is going to constantly drip lava drops, which is going to look amazing. And so I thought a darker block would look good because then those drips would highlight. But I don't like the top bottom of the Blackstone, so I don't think I'm going to be using Blackstone for that. I'm going to have to try to find something else. And the side texture I've decided that I do like. The hard part with the Blackstone stairs is that from the top of the stairs have the top texture, and then from the side it has the side texture. So it's really noisy. I haven't used the polished bricks but for 1 or 2 blocks at a time. This is where my use of Blackstone really falls off, even after trying multiple times. And I did like a 3-hour stream on Saturday where I was just troubleshooting and trying to figure out how to use this block. And ultimately the polished bricks, they're just so high contrast and they look so new but noisy. They don't really fit the way that anything else does with the Blackstone. So I've only used them very sparingly, only because polished Blackstone is closer to color and tone to regular basalt, not the polished basalt, but the regular basalt. So if you're mixing polished stone and basalt, they're very similar in color. And so that's what I've done with some of the pillars. Also, cauldrons work very well with basalt. I've been, as you mentioned, with basalt being very versatile. I do find that polished basalt looks a little bit too manufactured if you're trying to do any kind of like old ruined type thing. It looks like a little bit too much like a tree. Both versions of basalt, if you put anything more than 2 of them together in a line, you do start to see the stripiness, but we see that with stripped logs and stuff already. It's a texture technique, I think, made to make them look more round.
Yeah.
When they're by themselves, the unfortunate effect of when you put them all together is that they get very stripy. So yeah, I haven't really had a lot of luck with it. It's the build to kind of like, I took the easy road. The build is meant to be an ancient hall, so I'm kind of building with the intention I think it was designed for, but still struggling with Blackstone. The other thing that I have done and found and have, I guess, achievement unlocked, I found 13 pieces of ancient debris.
Nice. I assume you've been mining for Blackstone basically underneath the ground then, because that was going to be my next question, was are you going to basalt deltas to get your Blackstone, or are you digging underneath the the lava level of the Nether to find it?
So I've only found 1 basalt delta, and it was only just last night. That isn't like kind of like part of our scenic Nether sort of thing.
Sure.
So the ones that we found right away, we kind of decided, well, don't strip that one because that's not great. But the ones that we are going to, we hadn't found one until recently. But I was also in clearing this giant, like this room is 21 by 21 by 7. The hallway is 96 by 7 by 15. So like it's a large area.
Yeah.
And so I was just finding Blackstone naturally, just clearing out areas. And I did have to go looking for Blackstone. And so that's when I was finding the ancient debris. I wasn't looking for ancient debris. I was looking for Blackstone. Ended up with an awful lot of quartz and all kinds of great stuff too. But yeah, I haven't done anything with the ancient debris because true to a lot of the chatter I see socially online about ancient debris and netherite in particular, people are not super happy with the netherite tool texture.
Yeah.
Very, very indistinguishable from stone, especially if you have the enchantment glint still enabled.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I get a lot of people probably joking about in my Twitch chat, but I do see people occasionally saying, what are you using stone tools? And I'm like, well, it's it looks different enough to me, but maybe because I play this game constantly, it's probably a little bit more difficult for people to discern the difference if they are less familiar with the game or just don't know about netherite yet.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is that I already have a custom tool texture for my diamond tools just because I find the blue kind of silly, but also just as a designer I find it very easy to change the shape of something as a way to identify it. So silhouette and color are
Yeah.
both different on my pickaxe for diamond stuff, which is great. Very easy to distinguish between an iron pickaxe and a diamond pickaxe for me in game. On Twitch, where the video's small for people, sometimes people get confused and they ask. But I think what I want to do for netherite is the same thing. I'm going to take my diamond custom tool textures. I like the netherite block texture quite a bit. So I think I might take a look at that block texture and then try to design something that's a little closer to netherite for my tools. I also don't use an enchantment glint anyway, so that'll be fun. I haven't done anything with them. I have enough for 2 pickaxes and a set of boots, I think, because it's 4 ancient debris equals 1 ingot equals 1 tool that you can then, or 1 item that you can then augment on the smithing table. So I'm gonna roll with boots, a pick, and I don't know what else. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go pants or if I'm gonna just do a second pick or sword, or I don't know.
I think second pickaxe is a good choice. I think if you end up using a lot of the warped stuff, which I know you're not a big fan of the warped and crimson stems, but you tend to, if you're farming those, having a reliable hoe to use on the warped and crimson wart blocks. It's funny, I keep calling them crimson wart, even though they are nether wart blocks and have been in the game for a while, you know. But the ones that form the leafy areas of those giant fungi are a pain to clear because they don't despawn naturally, so you end up using a hoe way more than you would expect to if you are doing any farming of those trees, especially if you want shroom lights, because I find a lot of people really like shroom lights. And so I've been trying to get hold of some of those myself and have found having a very durable hoe pretty useful. I have a ton of diamond ones anyway, but just from raiding woodland mansions where they regularly appear as loot, but I feel like having a netherite one just for the extra durability alone is potentially worth it.
Yeah, and so I'll have to look into all of that kind of stuff because I do plan to use and want to use some of the, I don't know if the logs and the wood are really out there, but the warped wart blocks and the nether wart blocks, of course, are very bright, colorful, fun things. And when you've got some modern city builds and you want to use something that's bright and colorful, but it isn't as matte as like a concrete, like just no texture in a concrete. If you want something a little bit more vibrant for something or other, I don't know, you could use this carpet, wallpaper, all kinds of really cool stuff. And because we can farm this stuff so easily with just bone meal and nylium, then I'm gonna need a hoe, I think. And plus, like you said, shroom lights I think are gonna be fun. I do want to steal your idea somehow and get like a magma block shroom light lava flow going somewhere. I'm not sure where, but we'll figure that out at a later date.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing this week, basically.
Nice.
Following the theme of my main town area on the survival guide world, which is all centered around a ravine that I decided was going to be a source of geothermal energy for the town in the kind of lore of the world. I thought it'd be kind of fun to have a sort of volcanic biome nearby, in a sense, and have the entire thing be based on, like, you know, magma flows from underground, creating all of this energy, and maybe one of them has spilled over at a certain point, and there is magma and shroom light kind of coming down the mountainside by some of the houses. So I'm now farming shroom lights for that, and farming those manually is quite tricky because of the amount of excess blocks you have. The shroom light to everything else ratio is pretty low, so you end up really having to go through the warped and crimson fungus for that. So I've ended up making a shifting floor farm, kind of like the farms you see people make in flower forests to get large amounts of a specific type of flower. I've set one of those up to create warped and crimson foliage now, so I got one of those, and that was after spending an entire week in both the Nether and Bedrock Edition, surviving. And it's a very positive experience, actually. I mentioned this on the show last week, but I will double down this week and say that Nether survival is actually a really fun way to play the game. It definitely gives me a renewed experience for a lot of the stuff that is probably going to be easily overlooked by players who are already at endgame. If you've got Elytra and you're exploring the Nether quite easily, then stumbling upon a structure is probably one of those things that you go, oh, cool, there's a bastion or a nether fortress there, cool, now I know where that is. But if you are actively seeking them out because it's one of the most reliable ways of getting loot, like saddles and iron and potentially diamonds when you have to go looking for those. It's really nice having a strider to do that. And I don't think many people are going to be using striders outside of the context of some sort of Nether survival challenge. But I think it's really fun. That and mini games. I feel like striders might be kind of fun for like a lava racing mini game because of how you have to manage your speed when you're sprinting with them and stuff. But yeah, like striders, Nether Fortress, and Bastion loot, and the fear of death in general, I feel like, is some of the things that get overlooked when you're as advanced as I now am in my main Java survival guide world. And it's kind of nice to return to the point where all of that stuff is important, you know?
I was seeing that in my own playthrough and just that rush to the Nether that I did when 1.16 first came out. That fear of death. I missed having the stuff that I wanted to play with, but I did enjoy having that peril. Like you're not a rock star anymore, you know?
Yeah.
I like that feeling. It did make it feel like a new game and kind of reminded you like, hey, this is what survival's like early game. And because I'm spoiled, I have, we're end game server, that kind of stuff. Although I did play around in some Nether. What were we in? We were in Crimson Forests, Warped Forests, and a very small Basalt Delta last night with Alistair on the server. And he was exploring on foot for fun, and I was helping out with some sightseeing. And I had Elytra, but I was trying to stay on foot next to him so I could help. And boy, can you get turned around in those forests.
Yep.
Something fierce. Like it is. Yeah, like you can... I can totally understand. Like if you're not really paying attention, if you're not leaving stone torch, cairns on your way so you can find your way back, it is very, very dense. And hoglins are no joke. And end game as we all were, I was wearing an Elytra, Alistair had on gold armor, and so neither one of us were really decently, defended. Plus my boots and my pants are iron. Like I'm not rocking diamond everything. And when you get 3 or 4 hoglins chasing you, you have to deal with it. It's not like, I'll just turn around and shoot these. You're like, oh, that was 3 arrows and he's still running at me.
Yeah.
we have to contend with this,
Yeah, strangely, I found myself not worried too much about hoglins on Bedrock Edition because you could just spam click them still, and that kept them at a reasonable distance. And even without like having knockback enchantments or anything like that, it was still enough to keep them at bay. For a while. Because Bedrock Edition never got the weapon damage rebalance that Java did with the 1.9 combat update, I was finding that one of the piglins traded me a netherite hoe super early. That was the most effective weapon I had for a while because it did 6 damage on account of being netherite tier, which was better than the stone sword was in the beginning. So for a while there, I was working with that as my main weapon, and it was losing durability all over the place as a result, but it was good to get me out of some tight spots. Despite that, I still had several very avoidable deaths, and I think mark it down to my inexperience with Bedrock Edition, because one of them was I dismounted a strider after putting it in like a little lava lake area, and then I got off the strider while it was still in the lava, assuming that it would work the same way Java Edition did and just put me on the nearest available solid block. It turns out on Bedrock Edition, you just dismount in the same block as the strider, and I immediately sank into lava, and I was going for a fire resistance potion in my inventory, but I didn't get it out in time. So that was avoidable. The second avoidable death, entirely my fault, was opening an ender chest in a bastion while surrounded by piglins, because I'd been blocking off the chests to block their line of sight, or if they got angry at me, just give them a barrier that they couldn't get past and wait for them to stop being angry at me. But then I completely knocked that down and immediately went to an ender chest to try and store some of the stuff I'd just stolen from them. So justifiably, they immediately got mad. And yeah, I do still think it's a little bit strange that storage blocks that don't even exist in the Nether to begin with, like ender chests and shulker boxes, are the target of, piglin aggro. But then again, it did add to the challenge of it, and it was one of those wake-up call moments where I thought, wait, I have to be playing this a lot smarter than I currently am. So that was a bit of fun. If you want to see the next level of this challenge, by the way, I would encourage anybody who's interested in checking something like this out to go and watch Sliced Lime streaming, because whenever he's, not on the Legacy SMP, which I believe he's a part of, he is streaming a half-heart hardcore challenge.
Oh, right.
where you reduce your life points to 1 in hardcore mode. So if you take damage of any variety at all, even if you take like fall damage from falling 4 blocks instead of 3, then that's you dead. And I tuned into his stream a couple of nights ago now just to see what was up, and he's got to play the game in a very precise way. You can't be blasé about collecting resources. He spawned next to a crimson forest, so he was immediately able to get wood, but then of course the piglins could attack him more or less right away, so he had to stay around groups of zombie pigmen who would scare the piglins off for long enough that he could harvest a couple of trees, block off some areas of gold so that the piglins wouldn't see him mining that, and then get enough gold nuggets from those patches to make himself some gold boots. And he was having to be way more careful about the progression of everything. And from that point onwards, yeah, he managed to get himself a decent way. But then, of course, from there, you've got to look for blackstone if you want stone tools. I assume ultimately the goal is to either get to a certain level of tools or get back to the overworld, which can be done with wooden tools if you have the patience to mine gold with tools that break every so often and are kind of slow. But I like the concept of that. Probably not something I'll attempt myself because I will make too many mistakes. I'll be a little bit reckless or impatient when I play. I'll take some full damage, and then, again, some easily avoidable deaths will happen. But it's a really interesting... If you want to take that like hardcore challenge to the next level, or if you want to take Nether survival to the next level, really interesting way to play.
I am tempted by something like a hardcore because for me, the idea of doing a single player world is not as appealing because if I'm going to put that kind of a time investment into something, it's probably going to be the Citadel. But if it's hardcore, then it will ultimately have an end. And like you said, probably of my own stupidity. So it would be a short-term commitment, knowing that I probably wouldn't last that long. And again, like you said, might introduce some of those early game fear mechanics, where you really don't want to lose the progress that you've made. But yeah, I have watched some of the Slice Lime hardcore when he was doing overworld stuff. And even then, I was just like, dude, like, I don't know. I would be so stressed out this whole time, like he was doing a sugarcane farm or something and being very careful.
Yes.
just planting sugarcane. It's like, oh my God.
It's actually very simple to set up as well once you know the right commands. I think it's 3 commands he inputs just to start the Nether survival thing. He loads up a new world, opens it to land so he can enable cheats, sets his HP to 1, teleports himself to the Nether roof, and then uses the spread command from there that allows you to distribute players evenly amongst survivable terrain so that he doesn't just teleport himself into a wall in the Nether and die instantly.
Right.
And so that setup works very well. And once you know those 3 commands, it's just something you can reproduce over and over again. And in some cases, I tuned in, he died within about 5 minutes, and then he just set up the entire thing a second time, and it took him, 30 seconds to get the whole thing set up. So pretty easy to do, and you can just quit the world so it is saved to your menu, and then, load in, and cheats will be disabled again, and you'll be able to get on with it. But yeah, super fun. I recommend checking it out.
Moving on to the news, it's a very light snapshot this week. We've got Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 20W29A. Full notes will be at minecraft.net from our show notes, but the long and short of it is that tools are now sorted based on material in Creative Inventory. Spawn point and set world spawn commands now have an angle parameter, so players can spawn facing a specific direction by default. Customized world generation now has a world gen noise setting folder, which can contain noise configurations. A handful of bug fixes. One of the notable bug fixes is that players in spectator mode can now stop minecarts.
Yeah,
and believe it or not, that's it.
I thought I would bring up that bug in particular because it's something I ran into while I was using my camera account to spectate changes to my creeper farm. I redesigned the creeper farm. I say redesigned. I literally took out alternating wither roses to prove that creepers and spiders would still spawn in the old wither rose farm designs, just give them, occasional spawnable spaces, and it would still work as a somewhat viable, if a little slower, gunpowder farm. And while doing that, I ended up accidentally stopping the minecart a couple of times using my camera account, which was very frustrating because that's how the collection mechanism for that farm worked. And I'm glad that that's been fixed because occasionally you'll want to, spectate down into, a slime farm collection mechanism to make sure it's still running or something like that. and the player in spectator mode could stop a minecart, but then not push it again to start it going. So you've immediately got to go in there in survival mode or, creative if you want to do that, and just nudge it slightly to start it going again. It was just a giant inconvenience for a very, very specific type of thing you were going to do. So yeah, I'm glad that's been fixed. There were a few others in there as well, but I thought that one in particular was something I had specific experience of myself.
Yeah, some animation fixes and other things that are coming, which is cool. The custom world generation thing, I'm still very curious about this. I kind of wonder if it's going to end up being very niche audience. I have taken the time, speaking of Slice Lime, actually, he's doing a tutorial series on his YouTube channel for people that are more interested in the custom world generation setup, talking about world types, also talks about the noise controls in this week's Snapshot. It's all experimental, so whether or not you want to take the time to learn how to do it, knowing that it all could change in the future, is, I guess, up to you. I do feel like it's going to be something very powerful in the hands of people a lot smarter than me when it comes to the under the hood Minecraft stuff, like the people that have created Biome Bundle or Biomes of Plenty, things like that.
Yeah.
I feel like it could be some really fun stuff coming down the tubes for modded players or for modded world players. Obviously, we've mentioned on the show that custom world generation could be very useful for things like multiplayer servers that are very busy, and having like a mining desert, world would be, great for people that still want to have the grind of survival experience, but they don't want to have to worry about destroying certain areas of the server. But in trying to quickly look over what's involved, the stuff that I'm seeing doesn't look all that appealing. So I guess maybe it's so new that all the demo files are just that. They're just technical demo visuals. Nothing has really been tweaked to the point where it's actually aesthetic.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that's going to stop a lot of players is the fact that it all has to be done through coding like JSON files and stuff.
Yeah.
Right now, it's not got a GUI from within Minecraft the same way world customization used to. And I don't know if that is ultimately their end game with this stuff. It might be. But I think it's going to be definitely more for the data pack creation crowd, the map making crowd, who are probably the best placed people to appreciate features like this anyway. But without the custom world generation being like a series of sliders that players can load up from the world creation screen and click and drag and that kind of stuff, I think you're going to find fewer players messing with this. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing necessarily, because sometimes it was very difficult through tweaking those sliders to get something that wasn't just a giant ocean with spikes of terrain that were completely uninhabitable, which is what I tended to get anytime I messed around with, like, the noise values and the maximum height map and that kind of thing. But I think it could be very powerful, like you say, in the right hands, and whether that becomes more accessible to players or whether players have to use Slice Lime's tutorials to kind of educate themselves about that stuff. And I'm sure other tutorials will emerge as well, but it's great to know that he's already out there making stuff like this. I think it could do a lot for multiplayer servers or even single-player projects if you want to do something a little bit different. I do know that there are a few people out there who are still playing in the Infinity April Fool's snapshot, because that's still accessible and still a really interesting survival experience if you want something just completely out there and different from your standard Minecraft stuff. I think Wattles still does a series on the Infinity Snapshot, so there's still some appeal to stuff like that, and for people who want to do the digging, I'm sure it'll be a very rewarding thing.
I kind of wonder whether this kind of thing would benefit from like an online tool, like very similar to having, Amidst or other mapping tools for Minecraft that more advanced players are using to choose the seeds, that they have the right amount of resources for their server, for, whatever their plans are. I think it would be nice to have that kind of visual, like you said, that kind of slider thing where maybe even if it is an online tool, if you can say like increase noise, decrease noise, and watch those islands like turn spiky or get more round and flat, even though it's not going to be a direct representation of what your seed will look like, it will be kind of like an idea of this is what this slider does, rather than just like tweaking something and then wondering what it's going to look like on the other side. Having some sort of visual message saying like, oh, this makes things more spiky and aggressive. This makes things more round and flat. This will increase or decrease the water level, like all that kind of stuff. It could be some really, for people that can program in Java and do those kind of interfaces and stuff, it could be really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like a challenge to anybody out there who is familiar with making that kind of tool. If you want to take that on, then I'm sure that would be a really interesting thing for the community. The fact that this week's snapshot is very lightweight still kind of makes me wonder if 116.2 is coming soon, or if they're still going to be tweaking custom world gen and just haven't had much player feedback on that score. We were originally considering delaying my Patreon server until 116.2 so that Piglin Brutes would spawn in Bastions, because we were on 115 for a while and didn't want to update straight away because we were planning on resetting the Nether and we wanted to make sure everything was there. And then the 0.2 release, when it was announced, I just thought, well, they're going to add the Piglin Brute and that's it. It's just going to be like, next week we're going to get this. And now it's been a couple of weeks on. They're working on this custom world gen stuff, and we've already migrated the server to 116.1 anyway. And I'm quite glad we decided to do that, because otherwise people could have been waiting indefinitely for this. But yeah, I do wonder what... at this point, if they feel like it is worth the balance of making sure all of this custom stuff is taken care of first, so that can be something the community plays around with while they continue to work on 117 in the near future.
It is kind of strange that 116.2 didn't just come out and then 116.3 is the world gen snapshot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm surprised they didn't separate that out, because the world gen stuff doesn't seem to affect the Nether at all.
Yeah, I think it may just be a case of them wanting 116.2 to be like the last revision of this Nether update.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe they think it's going to be worth releasing in the meantime, worth waiting for. We will see. Let's move on to chunk mail, though. Seeing as we had quite a light snapshot, we can fill up the rest of the episode with you guys' emails. If you would like to email the show and potentially get your questions read out on air, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Once again, that's spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We are still receiving a couple of emails to the old inbox, probably people listening to old episodes, but we just use the old the spawnchunks@gmail.com for business and admin stuff now. So if you want to get your message read out on chunk mail, make sure it goes to the right address. This one comes in from Lisa. This is the first email we're going to read. The subject being bartering in Skyblock. Hi, in the last podcasts, you guys were talking about how overpowered piglin bartering is in the new update. What effects do you think this might have on Skyblock survival? With bartering, you can get lots of gravel, string, and other items that are usually quite difficult to obtain in Skyblock. And what other ways do you think 116 bartering has an effect on Skyblock? Thanks a chunk, Lisa. I like that. Thanks a chunk. I'm going to start signing off my emails that way.
I like that too. I'm going to defer to your extended experience in Skyblock, because I fell off the Skyblock train, pardon the pun. However, having renewable gravel in the Nether in Skyblock further removes the need for custom drops like zombies dropping gravel, and I believe also gives you an alternative to quartz. And if you're running 16.2, then you'll get blackstone that way too. But you have more time logged in Skyblock. Like, is this a game changer, or is it just kind of like moving some of the existing map tweaks that exist now just to different locations?
It's a bit of both, because quartz, gravel, and soul sand are all things that were added as data pack loot table drops for blazes in terms of quartz, gravel from zombies, and soul sand you got from wither skeletons. That is now all obtainable from piglin bartering. Nether brick is the other big one, because one of the issues that I ran into was building a nether brick platform for Nether Fortress mob spawns. And I don't know if this is actually a bug, or may have been a bug at the time that might have been fixed since, but if you're trying to spawn fortress mobs in that larger Nether Fortress hitbox, which is the only thing that it gives you access to, I think, in that Skyblock world, you have to spawn fortress mobs on a full block of nether brick. It can't be a slab at the right height. It can't even be a double slab that occupies the space of a full block. It has to be an original full block of nether brick, which is very frustrating, because I thought I was going to be smart with a limited resource, because you don't get any netherrack, of course, in the Skyblock world. You just get this tower made of nether brick that is effectively where the fortress hitbox is. I ended up rendering all of the nether brick I had mined out of that useless by turning it all into slabs, and so I had to mine some more out to make my spawning platforms in the first place. So having access to nether brick means a little bit more potential for making interesting nether brick spawning platforms for fortress mobs as well. Other stuff in that is the bartering loot table has changed a little bit, so there is some stuff that is no longer in the bartering table in 116.2. I have a feeling that String may have been taken out, or magma cream, I'm pretty sure, was also taken out. So there are some things that you're still going to have to get from that. But the other stuff that it gives you, stuff like gravel, it's going to be great to have a renewable source of that anyway for vanilla gameplay. But having it in Skyblock is going to be great. I think the new version of that map by Dr. Trog, the one that I found on Planet Minecraft, actually now spawns you in the Nether to start off with for the Nether update version of the map, and the first thing you have to do is get back to the Skyblock Island in the overworld. So instead of the race being get hold of obsidian for your first Nether portal and find a way to do that, instead it became about bartering with piglins enough and generating black stone so that you can make stone tools in the Nether, and then finding your way back to the overworld from there to start the traditional Skyblock experience. So I'm actually considering starting Skyblock again, just to work with some of the new mechanics and see how all of that stuff gets affected. Plus my 1.15 Skyblock world, if I updated it to 1.16.1 or 2, I wouldn't have access to half of the materials like Nylium, so I wouldn't be able to get warped and crimson wood. So I think it's going to be a deeper experience now, playing Skyblock in 1.16.2. Piglins definitely adding to that. They're effectively like the Wandering Trader is to Skyblock now, where actually they have a bunch of really useful resources which, outside of the context of it being a vanilla default world where terrain is everywhere and you can get that stuff from other places, piglins suddenly become a vital resource for getting some of the stuff that is otherwise not really obtainable.
As I'm building a netherite hall out of Blackstone or at least Blackstone accents, I'm definitely looking forward to getting some Blackstone from piglins rather than looking for it at the bottom of the Nether. If you start in Nether in Skyblock, does that mean like you start in a platform in the Nether in Skyblock, or is it like a full Nether?
I believe you start in a platform in the sky. The changelog for the map says it's added additional islands to the Nether now, which have the individual Crimson Forest, Warped Forest biomes and stuff in. So effectively what you get when you start in the Nether is what you would get in the overworld, where islands are at a distance and you have to generate some stuff just to get around to those other islands.
Fun. Yeah, that would be an interesting way to play that. That'll be a neat way to hone your skills before even trying another survival in traditional, just a straight up normal survival world. Would be try to do the Skyblock version.
Yeah, it's super fun. The other side of it being that you have to be pretty familiar with the mechanics already. Skyblock is always one of those things that's a kind of a challenge to how much you remember about Minecraft mechanics and renewable resources in particular, but mob spawning and stuff plays a huge part of that. So it's gonna be interesting to see how people adapt to a new generation of Skyblock with Nether survival being at the forefront of it.
Moving on to our next email from Logan Dude 10, finding ancient debris. Hi, Jonny and Joel. Me and a friend have been hyped for the Nether update and are super excited that it is now here. We really want to find ancient debris, but can't seem to find any. Any tips on what biome to go to or how to mine out large areas to find some? I did see Mumbo's netherite mining trip, but we don't have Grian to sell us infinite TNT. Love the show, Logan Dude 10. Sounds like a Hermitcraft fan if I ever seen one.
What gave you that impression? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been seeing multiple different techniques of mining ancient debris, and having not really spent much time specifically looking for it, I do have some anecdotal stuff that I think might be useful for people that are seeing a lot of beds and TNTs and like all kinds of really crazy techniques. I've been straight up mining 2x3 tunnels at Y13 in the Nether, spaced apart by 2 blocks, like a regular branch mine. I don't really know if I have any better luck in specific biomes that I quote unquote know are new. Because we updated the chunks on the Citadel, it's hard for me to tell whether a Nether Wastes is an old Nether Wastes or a new Nether Wastes. The only clue is like gold or blackstone present. Everything else looks the same when you're at Y13 and you can't see anything. So I have been getting, I don't think I've spent a lot of time in my streams mining specifically. So I've got 13 ancient debris from, I'm going to say maybe 2 to 3 hours of play in the basement of the Nether. The bonus when you do it this way is that you get lots of quartz and blackstone and nether gold and gravel. So if you take the time to mine those out, it will take the, we'll say, boring task of just straight up branch mining out of it, because then you have a break of mining in a straight line to then remove all the gravel or remove all the blackstone. And as a result, you're also mining vertically and diagonally in these random patches that kind of help you explore. I have been noticing that I've been finding more ancient debris when I have not been looking for ancient debris.
Yeah.
So Murphy's Law, things that can and will happen won't. I don't know. Basically, you just have to clear out a large area and eventually you will find some. I don't know whether strip mining, like completely removing entire swaths of the nether, is the best way. I can't be bothered to deal with all the fires that are left behind by beds. I don't have a TNT duper on the Citadel, so any TNT that I use, it's crafted, so I don't really feel like using it for mining, especially where I've got diamond tools and I can blitz through netherrack quite quickly. But I have found that mining higher tunnels, like don't just do like a little 1x2 or a 2x2. I find that if you go up by 2 or 3 or almost as high as your pickaxe can reach, you tend to expose a lot more. The one other benefit I find of doing branch mining is that any kind of pockets of lava that you hit are a lot easier to deal with than if you have exploded something and then you get lava that then fans out over 6 or 12 blocks, where it's just, you can just block it off, plug the hole, and keep going if you're doing branch mining. But I know you've been spending a lot of time on your streams mining for ancient debris. So what are your tips for Logan?
I feel like this has become my specialist subject now because I've been putting in the time. As of this email, I have mined 634 ancient debris according to the stats in my Minecraft Survival Guide world.
Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah, I'm heading towards, I want to make myself a netherite beacon. I want to do the full netherite beacon thing, just because it also gives me something fun to do to chill out and just mine or blow some stuff up and talk to my chat in streams. So I've been doing this a lot on Twitch streams just for a few hours, a couple of times a week. And I started out doing the branch mining method, or at least mining long tunnels, and starting at Y16 and then doing a diagonal at Y14, so you still end up exposing all of the blocks around that area and just kind of mining holes, making it look kind of like Swiss cheese in the nether, but then you end up with as much of those blocks in that chunk exposed as possible, so you'll potentially end up finding the ancient debris if there is any in that chunk. And there should on average be 1 or 2 veins per chunk. Apparently, from what I read on the Minecraft wiki, and people have done an analysis of ancient debris spawn rate per layer, Y15 on average has the most ancient debris, so you should probably be mining around there. I've ended up mining out a lot of netherrack that way, and I decided that it was probably going to be slightly faster to locate it using explosives, because it removes the aspect of having to, churn through your inventory, get rid of all of the netherrack and the stuff that you don't want. And while most of that will just despawn on the floor anyway, it just clears out a larger area faster so that you can just get to mining specifically the ancient debris and specifically the stuff that you want. You do have to contend with lava, for which, I bring fire resistance potions with me now, most of which are just bartered from piglins at this point anyway, so it's mostly fine. And I've had decent luck using the bed method lately, but that's mainly because I haven't remembered to AFK at my mob farm to make more gunpowder to get myself some more TNT. And I've been doing occasional sand farming as well to get myself some more TNT. Went through about a shulker box of it on one stream, got 100 ancient debris just from that. So that's pretty good, but that requires you to be able to craft a shulker box of TNT, which means a lot of gunpowder farming if you have the, multi-tier mob farm to be able to do that. And the bed method, typically from what I've heard people say anecdotally, I believe Nembon has a really good video about the best method of doing this, or one of the more efficient methods of doing this, which is to mine along a chunk border. Just do a tunnel just big enough for the player to go through, sort of 1x2 tunnel, and then dig poke holes to your left and to your right, place a bed in each of those, and then explode those to the left and right hand sides, and that way you're basically covering 2 chunks at once with the explosion. You've got one bed blowing up a large area to your left in the chunk on the left, and then the chunk on the right also gets covered. And through doing that and just continuing a tunnel straight on and then checking to the left and the right with the beds every 8 blocks or so, you end up blowing out a pretty large area and making sure that you cover a pretty broad swath of the nether. The other thing I've been doing is just digging a long tunnel, placing TNT all the way back down the tunnel, maybe you spaced 1 or 2 blocks apart so that the chain reaction will keep going, and then just lighting it at the other end with a flame bow and watching the entire thing set off in a chain reaction, which is the advantage of TNT, is the fact that you can be away from it for a good distance, unlike beds where you have to be up close and hiding behind a block so it doesn't just explode you. And the TNT chain reaction will just blow out a large tunnel. You deal with a couple of pockets of lava here and there, swim through them with fire resistance potions if you need to, and then all of the ancient debris is just hanging in the air ready for you to collect it. I think TNT is probably my favorite of the methods, but I think in terms of stress levels, it goes TNT, and then mining because it's relatively chill, and then beds because they generate a lot of fire and they explode in your face. In terms of profit, TNT and beds are about equal for me, and then mining takes a little bit... It takes more effort to get the same amount of ancient debris. It'd probably take about twice as long, I would expect. Ultimately, it's just about luck, though. You're going to get lucky finding specific blocks in specific chunks. It's much the same as mining diamonds. You never really know if the wall of netherrack is going to contain another ancient debris behind it or not. You just have to get lucky.
And that's something that I've been finding too, is like I'm going looking for blackstone and then not finding blackstone and trying to figure out where the heck I can find blackstone. And it's like, oh, look, ancient debris. That's not blackstone.
Yes.
That's not what I want. And so just whenever you're looking for something, you always kind of find the opposite stuff. But
yeah, in terms of biomes, I'll just say you find ancient debris evenly in basically any biome that you're going to mine for it, whether it's nether wastes or one of the 2 forests. Basalt deltas, soul sand valley should all have the same amount of debris in them in terms of world generation. I would avoid basalt deltas where possible if you're using explosives or if you're using the mining method, because the terrain is much less blast proof and it takes longer to mine because you can't insta-mine that stuff without a beacon. And if you want to set up a beacon there, then sure, but if you're at lava lake level or below, then you're going to have to clear out a huge amount of netherrack above you so that the beacon beam can reach the nether ceiling. It's going to be a little bit more of an effort. And if you're using explosives, I tend to begin at like Y level 12 or below so that you avoid opening up the lava lakes in the ceiling and having all of that stuff rain down on you. It'll still happen occasionally, but it's a lot easier to manage if you're not mining at Y15 and then exploding stuff up to about Y20 where the bottom of those lava lakes is.
Yeah, I was having that experience too, where I was trying to decide what level to put the hull on, and I haven't done a lot of work on my build because I'm trying to figure out what would be the best level to be on, and I think I might even revise. I haven't gone so far with the build that I can't just lower it by a couple of blocks.
Yeah.
That I think it might be beneficial to start at Y12, and ultimately we're going to be standing at like 12.5 or 11.5 or something, because I want to be able to slab everything so we don't have to deal with unwanted guests. Because it is a large open build, I don't want ghasts to spawn in any of the like the 4x5 areas that will be exposed between the pillars. Mm-hmm. Something that I noticed in my mining for ancient debris that I feel the lack of when I did my strip mine, which is just a great big open chasm below my witch farm. I found a lot of diamonds, a lot of redstone, all that kind of stuff. But I had water streams set up all over the place so that whenever my inventory was full, I would just go over to a chest and dump everything I didn't need, and it would eventually get spat out into a water stream and back up to my sorting system. I am not letting a lot of the netherrack despawn on the floor because I'm using nether brick in a lot of the builds in the nether. So I'm smelting it all. I'm saving it as much as I can. That's convenient. Obviously, I'd leave some on the ground, but I'm just stuck with bringing shulker boxes around and filling them up and then running them back. And it starts to get a little bit tedious after a while. And I kind of wish there was a better way to transport items long distances in the nether. Yeah. Now that the nether has got such a feature-rich environment and people want to spend more time there and they want to like do cool things. And I just think it would be really neat to have some sort of transport for items obviously water doesn't work and I get why it doesn't, but something in there to help us move items that's not just an ice road, because I'm not even sure how you would do that in a straight line. I know how to do it in a circle for sorting systems to move things around, pushing them around with pistons and an ice, but to keep them going in a straight line, it'd be difficult.
Yeah.
So
Your other alternatives there being hoppers, which can create lag, and once you get into unloaded chunks, you encounter the same problem regardless of what the method is. Is if you're disappearing in the opposite direction to where these items are supposed to be going, then eventually they're going to hit a point where the chunk unloads, and then the item is just stuck there. Which isn't going to mean they'll despawn if they're out in the open, but if they're in a row of hoppers, then they're not going to proceed past that point until that area gets loaded up again. So if your tunnel is long enough that it's beyond your render distance and the load distance, then you're going to run into the same problem either way.
Yeah, and even then, just to have something that's like halfway, like just not be able to have to run all the way back to the storage room, in order to move on and do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of adventure to see how different people are coming up with different ways to get at the ancient debris.
And on the subject of inventory stuff, we have another email here from Nayap, who wanted to talk about Terraria's inventory ideas and how those could apply to Minecraft. Hello there! I've been playing a lot of Terraria, which is a game which has a ton of different items. With every update, Minecraft starts to feel more like this. In Terraria, you have an extra inventory slot which works as a trash can. It can hold a stack of items, and when you put another item in it, the previous one gets voided. To avoid voiding special items, you can mark them as favorites. I think Minecraft needs a new inventory system in general, but this could be a good start to deal with messy inventories. What do you think? And that one comes in from Nayap. I've played a bit of Terraria myself. Have you played Terraria at all, Joel? Have you ever got into that?
I've only seen it played every once in a while. I think I've watched a little bit of Python play it, because he's big into that. And I know that I've tuned into one of your streams at some point when you were playing it, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've really got stuck into Terraria. And I think it's Terraria, whatever. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But anyway, it's got some good ideas when it comes to inventory stuff, because Nayap's email is entirely correct. Terraria is one of those games where they had ideas and they got straight into the game. Like, where Minecraft feels minimalist and restrained in its approach to adding stuff, Terraria is like the kitchen sink of that approach. Everything goes in there. And so the inventory sorting system has to be pretty smart. And there are some aspects of it that work better because Terraria is a 2D game as opposed to Minecraft's 3D angle. But there are a couple of things that really work for it. There is a way of quick depositing items into nearby chests that already contain the same item. So you can go back to whatever storage room you have and just hit quick stack, and anything that is not marked as keep this in my inventory at all costs just immediately gets transferred to all of the chests around you. There is also, the trash can idea, and there are a few other things like auto-sorting that are built into the Terraria inventory as a standard feature. Not to mention, I think it's a row or two longer and maybe a couple of rows wider as well, a couple of columns wider. So there are some good things going on in Terraria's inventory. However, my response to this is always that adding quality of life features like that potentially removes the need for some of the interesting inventions that come up within the Minecraft community. Like, in the case of the trash can idea, there are community-made contraptions like trash cans which will, throw items against a cactus or burn them in lava to get rid of them. And that's a Minecraft way of getting around the problem of needing to dispose of items. It's not something that you can set up everywhere, but you can just chuck items out of your inventory into lava. Likewise, the quick deposit thing would basically remove the need for redstone sorting systems, because you could just walk into a room, click one button, and then everything in your inventory would get sorted into chests. So I feel like it's a good idea for quality of life, and we know that Minecraft needs some kind of inventory update, inventory management update as things progress and more new stuff gets added. But you need to make sure you're not treading on existing inventions that exist within the community and have kind of a legacy behind them at this point. We've seen the uproar about iron farm mechanics changing and how that effectively renders those contraptions obsolete. And just having a single click button like Terraria doesn't feel like a very Minecraft approach to the problem to me.
Yeah, I'd agree. The direct correlation that I can bring to the table is playing Satisfactory, which also has an inventory that grows exponentially as you continue to play that game and deal with more items and stuff like that. And they have a trash can in your inventory. But that game also has an inflatable pocket dimension as part of the lore. So there's a reason why you can kind of just like void stuff. It's also an experimental game and early access and all that kind of stuff. But So I agree that like having world trash cans and having world sorting systems create things for players to do, and I think that's cool. I love sorting systems. I don't want to not have to build one. Uh, the thing that I find frustrating, especially in my latest adventure with Blackstone, which by the way there are 17 block variations of Blackstone if you include buttons and pressure plates, and when you are making all of them so you can test them to see which look the best in your build, and then you go into your inventory looking for the right kind of stair, boy, can you get lost. And one of the things that Satisfactory does have is a sort button. And I think this would be pretty useful in Minecraft. I don't think it would necessarily break any kind of Minecraft um, gameplay to be able to leave your hotbar alone. So your, number one sword, number two bow, however a lot of people have their stuff set up, all stays the same. But if you could just sort your inventory to then stack the things that you have multiple stacks of together, condense everything, and then maybe alphabetize things, it would go a long way. I think as the game has got quite a few items now, as you're trying to figure out what is what and where you've put it. That to me, I think would be one thing that I think would be a simple way to help the Minecraft inventory without a complete revamp. A sort button would help considerably. As a tip, though, as quality of life tip, something that I do, this is how I can assort my stuff. I never take a full stack out of a chest. I either right click to cut it in half, or I pick up the stack and I right click once to drop a single item back where it was. So that way, when I return to a chest, I just shift click everything into the chest.
Yeah, and there's a stack of it already there, so it's sorted in the right order.
Sorts, yeah. Now, if you get overflow, if like you've got more than you came out with, then sure, it's going to fill in the empty spots in that chest. But it's a quick way for you to look at your inventory and go, this is gobbledygook. I just don't have the patience for this right now. I will just go to a chest, empty everything, and then pull back what I need. But because the chest has remained sorted manually, I find it quite useful to do that, because then you can say, okay, well, now I don't have the polished bricks or the polished brick walls in my inventory. I know I only have the 3 different kinds of Blackstone that I'm actually going to be using in the build. That kind of stuff. Very useful, I'm sure, with all the different wood types. And like when you get to multiple variations of things that all have the same shape, stairs, slabs, that kind of stuff, it's quite helpful.
Yeah, I think a sorting button would be kind of handy, and there are mods like inventory tweaks which add that to vanilla Minecraft. And the thing that's always rubbed me the wrong way about inventory tweaks is how it chooses to sort things. You can set up rules for how it does that, but that's a little bit more of a complicated situation. But if I want to have my inventory a certain way, I always like to keep an ender chest in the top left or top right corner. I keep all of my torch supplies on the left-hand side with, coal and sticks and that kind of stuff. And then I keep general blocks and stuff in the middle. Shulker boxes usually top row or on the right-hand side. And if you don't teach inventory tweaks how to sort stuff in a certain way, then it will rearrange it to whatever order it finds appropriate. And sometimes the categories it chooses are not the categories I would choose. So it's about introducing a smart way of doing that where players are more particular with their inventory, they're going to have an easier time with it, that it's going to kind of, if not learn their patterns intelligently, then have some way of them introducing their own patterns so that it's not going to completely disorganize their inventory instead of actually organizing it.
Our next email comes from Anonymous, and it is regarding multiplayer versus single player. It was originally intended for the interview we did with Zumavoid in episode 96, but I thought it was still worth bringing up on the show. Hi, Jonny and Joel. A couple of weeks ago, you had X in the show, and obviously he is the admin of Hermitcraft. Not forgetting that you two also run servers. How do you run them and make them run smoothly? Yours faithfully, Anonymous. I'll start off by saying that I am lucky in that Infinity Cove, the patron server that I run, has a great mod team and overall great community, a very active Discord channel, and there's a lot of communication, which Eximavoid mentioned is key to a lot of multiplayer servers that's happening on the patron server. So I have to do very little in terms of socially managing the server. We did set things off in the right foot, though. At present, we've got default vanilla 1.16.1. We will be updating to 1.16.2 when it comes out. Talking about adding fabric for performance stability. There are around 20-ish players, and I would say 10 of them are pretty active. I don't think I've ever seen more than 6 to 10 on at once, unless there's been a very specific server organized activity where people are logging in on purpose at the same time. So performance-wise, we are not really taxing the current server setup we have. Lately, though, we have had some growing pains of people and coming and going from the server. It's not a criticism. It's just part of life. It's part of an ongoing server thing that you have to deal with. So we're currently drafting a policy on how to hold people's builds and spaces on the server if they're going to be gone for a long time or if they're going to be gone for a short time. We have an Infinity Cove charter. I believe, Pixelverse, I stole this idea from you, that people have to read and agree to before they get whitelisted on the server. It is mostly just common sense written out so people can be clear on things, but there are a few rules regarding streaming, camera accounts, that kind of stuff that we have outlined. Just common courtesy things. But we are adding now, as we have more people and we're experiencing more fluctuation in the server population, to say like, hey, if you're going to leave, make sure you're clearly communicating in the Discord that you are leaving, if you're leaving permanently, if you care or don't care if the build that you did is consumed by other people. Because ultimately, as people leave and as new people come in, we're going to be running shy on space if people want to play with and build near one another. Eventually, it's just going to be kind of hard if people are avoiding this one area that's from someone from 6 to 12 months ago, because the server is now coming up on a year, I think, or 2. I can't remember. I think it's a year. So yeah, like as we've been growing, we're kind of flexing the rules and kind of growing with it. But ultimately, to run a smooth server from a social standpoint, it really does boil down to encouraging good communication. I keep tabs on some stuff, but honestly, like I just don't have the time. So I just trust the mod team and they bring anything to my attention that needs doing. I haven't checked with you in a long time, Jonny. Like, how big is your patron server? Like, do you have a large mod team? Do you have a lot going on there?
It's me and a couple of other people who aren't around all that much, but I'm lucky again in that being a patron server, also people, feel a little bit more invested because they are literally, investing their own money in order to be there, and it's a reward for people who support me on Patreon. So people are naturally going to care a little bit more about that stuff, and socially the flare-ups we have been incredibly minor. We had one instance of griefing a while ago, and luckily enough at the time I was running a brilliant Spigot plugin called Core Protect. And Spigot or Bucket or Paper will all, I believe, run Core Protect, and it's very, very good for sorting out instances of griefing because it logs all the activity. I think in probably a similar way to how Replay Mod or something like that would log the activity, where it's actually keeping track of anything that has been placed or moved or any actions players have taken, and you can roll back a certain amount of time, so you can basically change a certain radius around you to how it was a day or two ago. So if somebody's shop gets blown up by TNT, then, you can basically tell it, roll back the last couple of days, and the shop will just be restored to the state it was a couple of days ago, which is a very, very simple, effective, easy way of dealing with it. It will also tell you who has placed that TNT if you query that, so then you can deal with the people who are potentially causing trouble. Outside of that, I took Azuma's advice and switched my server over to Fabric and Lithium when we updated to 1.16, mostly for better data pack compatibility. And at that point, we had a couple of reports of laggy performance, but I think that was mainly down to people loading new chunks in the Nether. We eliminated that eventually by switching back to Paper, which is still potentially going to, conflict with some of the data packs we have installed, but that's relatively light. And Fabric wasn't compatible with Core Protect, and Paper was. So as a security plugin, I feel like that's the most important thing. My community has, I think, maybe 80 or so players who are whitelisted on the server at any given time, and they are, I'd say maybe, like you, we have 10 or so of them who are playing like every day at various times around the world, and there are probably a larger cast of 20 or so who will dip in and out depending on how much time they have. It's kind of hectic handling a community like that, but I'm lucky in that they mainly handle themselves. In terms of the running of the server, I check in every so often with the server admin console, which is something that if you're not familiar with server hosting, the server host will typically provide an area where you can log in and take a look at all of the log messages that Minecraft is generating in the background, not the stuff that players are chatting in-game, but server-side messages that say people logging in, people logging out, anybody running like a whisper command to somebody else, that shows up on the console log as well, and any commands the server is running regularly in terms of command blocks that are running, you can assess conflicts with that. It will also tell you if the server is suffering from a little bit of lag. There'll be warning messages saying, the server is running 5,000 ticks behind or something, in which case you've probably got a serious lag problem. There's a lot of different tools out there that allow you to make your life easier as a server admin, and I'm still what I would consider a novice about this because I've just been running a small community server for my patrons for a few years now, and we haven't really had that many incidents that we've had bad experiences or anything like that, but if you're running a server for a community of friends, you can pretty much guarantee that you don't need to do too much in terms of security, whereas if you're running a server with a group of strangers, you might want to be a little bit more concerned with that. As far as the Hermitcraft perspective on it, I'm pretty sure they can run their server on a dedicated machine, so performance-wise, they have like a whole computer that is dedicated to running Hermitcraft as opposed to buying server space on a hard drive that is probably running 3 or 4 other worlds simultaneously. So in terms of performance, they might have a bit of the upper hand there.
This is not an advertisement, but I use KubeToast for both the Citadel and Infinity Cove. Infinity Cove is actually a larger server imprint because of just the number of people compared to the Citadel, which is like 6 people. But I find that their Prisma login, which is what you were talking about, Jonny, their server admin UI on the web for looking at the back end, looking at the console, that kind of stuff, very intuitive. It's very nice, clean design from a designer point of view. It's very easy to see what's going on, very easy to know what you're looking at. They give you access to the files and the FTP that way too. So if you're not used to using an FTP, you can just use their interface, which is good because then you know where you're putting the files, things like data packs, that sort of stuff. So that's really nice too. Also, I do find that the KubeToast customer service to be very good. So if I have questions about how do I use Fabric, do I want to use Fabric, what kind of server should I set up in the first place, they were pretty helpful when I first reached out. So sometimes if you have more technical questions, it might be best to talk to the server host provider you're going to be going with, because they might actually say, oh, actually, you're running Java and that's going to run better on our single thread systems that are based in Montreal. Even though that isn't the closest node to you geographically, it's the best node for you knowing what you want to do with the server. I thought that was great advice. So stuff like that can be very helpful. Also, from to expand on a point that Jonny made in terms of people taking Patreon servers a little bit more seriously because there's money involved. I would say that's very true, even of just social servers. So when people are playing with me on the Citadel, I did ask that they commit a little bit of money, whatever they felt comfortable, just for server upkeep. And that just kind of keeps everybody invested. It not only keeps everybody on their toes. Now, granted, everybody on the Citadel is my friend, so everybody's on, they're just friends. Everybody's in good behavior. But the difference is there, I think, that it also encourages players to play more often. So people that have busy lives, busy family lives, they tend to log in a little bit more because they are sending a couple of bucks a month, to the server, and they feel like they're invested. And as an adult, there's something about monetary exchange that makes you feel like you should do something. So yeah. I have found that it's kept the server more active by having some financial exchange. Also, if you do it that way and you are doing it with either people that you've met online or friends that you can poke in the arm, you're dealing with people that are probably going to have to be old enough to have either a Patreon account or have a PayPal account. And that rules out some griefers by inexperienced, we'll say younger people that may not have the same sort of impulse control that I know Eximovoid mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago as well. So.
Yeah, our last email this week comes from Mr. Booch909, and we actually have another email that will follow up into this one quite well from Duncan M. So I'm going to read these two in tandem, and then we'll get into our last discussion here. So Mr. Booch says, "Hi guys, I recently started listening to your show. I've been watching Pix Riffs on YouTube for a while. Love the content, and it's definitely sparked some inspiration in me to play Minecraft again. This is where my problem with my world/playstyle comes in. I have a ton of material. I love to grind for resources, go mining, and terraform. I just don't really know what to build once all that is done. I'm currently working on a Nether island in my overworld. It's supposed to represent a glitch in the Matrix, in a sense, just kind of plop down into the overworld. It uses a mix of all the old and new Nether building materials, Other than the landscape, though, I don't really know what to do for buildings. So where do you find the inspiration to build something? Do you always come up with a sense of lore for building before you start? Thanks for the high-quality podcast. Always listen when a new episode spawns in from an overworld far, far away, Mr. Booch 909. So many good email sign-offs that I just need to be writing down. But the next one comes in from Duncan M, and this is about multiplayer versus single player. I think this was also meant to be for the Azuma show as well. Sorry we didn't get around to that right away. But Duncan M says, just wanted to say, love your work, keep it up. What do you think are the pros and cons of multiplayer versus single player? And would you ever want to switch to the opposite of what you currently do? Much love, Duncan. So I think these emails kind of go hand in hand a little bit, some from the building perspective and some from the multiplayer versus single player perspective. What do you feel about this one, Joel?
So I think one of the pros in multiplayer Minecraft is being inspired by your server mates. Or it's something as simple as just wanting to play Minecraft but not sure what you want to do, being stuck on your old build on what to do next. You can always just log in and help somebody else. That's what I did last night. I was struggling with this Blackstone stuff. I wasn't sure what decisions I was going to make as far as the full design level. And then I noticed Alistair was playing and he was going and trying to find stuff in the Nether that I knew where it was. And so I kind of played wingman and I was shooting ghasts and making his life a little bit easier. We were chatting, just having fun and playing, and I wasn't building anything. I was just kind of hanging out with a server mate. And I wanted to play Minecraft, but I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing next. So having a server mate who already had a mission in mind and just helping them helped a lot. And in exploring some of the Nether biomes, I got inspired just by seeing the Crimson Forest and the Warped Forests up close, really taking a look at some of the mechanics of the new what are the warped vines called? Twisted vines?
Twisted vines, yeah.
Twisted vines. So like playing with those and bone mealing those and seeing what those do and stuff like that. So I've got some ideas for future builds just from, an hour or two of hanging out with Alistair. Often on a multiplayer server, you'll have different zones if it's a long-standing server, just to help keep things organized. Think, the shopping district on Hermitcraft, or on the Citadel, we've got the modern city. We've got a newly but not touched medieval zone. We've got lots of places where people can build redstone farms. And so if you have multiple zones, whether it's something that you've done yourself on a single player, or if it's something that you've done for organizational purposes on a multiplayer server, then you can kind of log in and play whatever you're in the mood for. Like if you really want to build a castle, if there's already a spot that you can build one, that's great. But if you log in and the whole server is all castles and you want to build a skyscraper, well, it can be kind of difficult. And so having different zones mean that if you're not in the mood to deal with placing more bushes while you're, customizing creeping vines up over a castle wall, you just want to place a lot of blocks, you can go to the modern city and build a skyscraper. Believe me, it's a lot of the same block. Mm-hmm. A con of multiplayer, and this might be depending on your personality, you do sometimes have to compromise for plans for other players. Boils down to good communication, as we've mentioned a number of times this week. But I know that the Citadel is a bit of an exercise in my own ability as an artist and art director to let go and let other people do things. And there's been lots of times where I've had plans for a certain area on the server and I've not voted or voiced those plans. And then someone comes along and says, hey, can I build here? And of course I have to say yes, because I've not said that I was going to build there. And then I have to adjust my plans, or we have to work together. And it's just a good personal exercise, I find. I don't know whether it's just my personality, the fact that I work as an artist in real life, that I tend to be not so much my way or the highway, but I definitely I have a vision, and I very quickly get a vision, and I often have to change that vision on the Citadel. But it usually puts me into a corner, which is where good ideas spring from. So you can kind of like work together with other people. I find that's also a great way for inspiration as well. For lore and stuff, we've talked about lore on this podcast before about getting ideas and trying to having a throughput. If you're not a creative type though, like if you're more of a technical Minecrafter, or if you just like the repetition of Minecraft, lore can be overwhelming, I find sometimes. So rather than just always focusing on story and stuff like that, you can just start with a loose sense of history. My city build, the Southport on the Citadel, doesn't really have lore. It's just, we wanted to build a city. I kind of wanted it to mimic real cities that we see in real life as a bit of a challenge. Most of those cities will start off as a smaller town or settlement and then grow into something larger. So there's no story in Southport. It's just a matter of like, well, it's a port city and it started off with a small town. So we're going to have buildings that look like they're from an older time period and then move forward into buildings that are modern. And that's enough to kind of say, okay, well, that section over there will be old, this section over here will be new, and that informs the kind of building you're going to be doing in different areas. And so just having that sense of history, I find, is a big one. If
Yeah.
you're, sorry, go ahead.
Now, I think lore really isn't necessary to start building at all, and I think sometimes buildings can inspire lore and not the other way around. Like, if you just start with a building style that you like and you think, oh, I want to build a skyscraper, I want to build like a kind of rustic inn, then whatever you end up building sort of informs what else should be around it. Like, there's no need to build a skyscraper if there isn't a city around it, because a single skyscraper on its own just feels a little bit out of place and lonely. If you want to build a rustic inn, then that's going to be a place people will travel to, so you maybe want to have a couple of other dwellings nearby, and it's got a road that passes through. You maybe want to build a stables, and that can grow out into a town from there. You just have to think logically about the kind of stuff that would be around that in the real world. You're obviously working with a fantasy kind of footprint there with the Nether stuff, but you think about the structures that are in the Nether already. Do you want to maybe adapt those for the overworld? Do you want to build structures that look more at home in the overworld but with Nether materials? You can have that stuff be informed by the stuff that is just in Minecraft and is already around you without having to reach super far for some sort of fantasy idea that you have to spring fully formed from your head, you know? I think it sounds like you know what you want to build, referring here to Mr. Booch's email. It's just a matter of having confidence in the idea, because you've got the idea of the Nether, just being plonked into the middle of the overworld on an island. Maybe you want segments of the Nether structures to be in there. You want like a broken off section of Nether Fortress or a bastion or something like that. Or maybe even, if this has been lifted out of the Nether from a previous point in space and time, design what the bastions used to look like and do the kind of stuff that we were talking about previously, where effectively you are renovating the idea of a bastion instead of having this crumbled down, ruined version that we see in the Nether right now. And it may be a case that if you're on a single player or a multiplayer server, it might be fun to bring other players in, especially if you're not confident in your own building skills, but you have a friend who is a dynamite builder. Superb opportunity for collaboration, and then maybe you can do them a favor by helping them terraform something that they're not, super great at doing, or just gather resources for them if that is your jam.
Yeah, I think that having the existing lore in Minecraft that people often forget about, like they always kind of want to reach for these grand stories and stuff, when some of the buildings and designs in the modern city are built around the simple fact that water elevators are a thing in Minecraft, and we've just accepted that we're going to put them in the city rather than trying to build elevators that reflect the real world, because that would take forever and be not convenient to travel up 160 blocks one piston at a time.
Yes.
So we just said, all right, well, everything's got water elevators, and that dictates a huge amount of the design on the inside of the buildings, because you have to dedicate water columns and space vertically in the building for it and all that kind of stuff. And it's been fun too. So stuff like not looking too far outside of Minecraft for inspiration. I like the idea of bringing the Nether. I think he even said something about, or they even said something about a matrix glitch sort of thing. So maybe, having some modern buildings or things that look like Tron or sci-fi, or just, I'm trying to remember what the Matrix had for visual storytelling, things like that. Is it going to be dirty and gritty, or is it going to be a clean overworld with a dirty, gritty Nether kind of poking up into it? I do find that something you can get a lot of reference images for these days is like the Nether invading the overworld. That tends to be a kind of a go-to I see a lot on YouTube and different images. If you're looking for just straight up shape language and ideas, this will help you with your terraforming as well. I've mentioned this on the show a couple times before, but I think we have a lot of new listeners over the last few weeks. Artstation.com, if you want to browse for environment concept art. Or another tip for buildings is isometric top-down game art. So think the kind of stuff you'd see in like mobile games, top-down stuff like Stardew Valley, that kind of a thing. Concept art for that is usually very chunky because it has to be read at a small scale. And if it's chunky, it's very easily translated to Minecraft. I talked about this actually in my personal Discord recently. LegoIdeas.com is also a great inspiration for people doing wild and wonderful things with Lego. which is already made of blocks. So again, if you're trying to figure out how many bricks the roof is versus how many bricks the door is, using Lego as a reference is great because it's not perfect blocks, it's not perfectly cubed, but it's close. And so you can really kind of get a lot of inspiration there, especially for medieval buildings. I find that Lego also lends itself more to medieval, or like not modern city stuff so much as like skyscrapers, but more of like that 1960s kind of like smaller town buildings where they'll have like shops on the bottom and apartments on top and things like that. So more of a quaint feel. You'll get a lot of inspiration from Lego as well. I'll put a little asterisk and disclaimer for things like artstation.com. Sometimes the content can be a little bit more adult, not safe for work. So just check with people depending on where you are and before you check it, because you are searching through a lot of art, and art can be a lot of things to a lot of people. But if you're honing it down to concept art for environments, it's usually pretty safe.
Yeah. Going back to the single player versus multiplayer, I think having server mates around as inspiration is a really great thing. It's really fun seeing firsthand how other people build, and whether you end up taking your cues from their build style or if you do your own thing, it definitely feels like a creative atmosphere more so than just playing in single player. And going back to that question about whether you'd want to switch to the opposite of what we currently do, I played on multiplayer servers for 5 years, mostly on the decidedly vanilla server and a couple of offshoots of that were started by the various server members, some of whom have gone on to do Legacy SMP right now. Mythical Sausage and F-Whip were both former server mates of mine on DV. And the server life worked pretty well for me for a long time, and I think maybe still would, but I have certain things that I really like about single player now that I wouldn't want to give up, mainly because I have this whole YouTube series tied into it more than anything else. And I think having full control over the world, even though you have to do everything yourself, allows you to set your own pace. The flip side of multiplayer servers, even though you have a lot of other people around you who can gather resources for you, sell them, if you aren't inclined to gather a ton of stuff yourself, then you can always, chuck a few diamonds in the direction of somebody who needs them. Multiplayer servers often reach a point where a few players can't really keep pace with anyone else. Time commitments, if everyone's not, committing the same amount of time to it each week, it can start to feel like some people fall behind. And if that's you, then it means you end up kind of out of sync with everybody else. If you didn't have time to jump into a server right when the Nether update happened, you log in and suddenly everybody's got full Netherite armor and is grinding away with, ancient debris this, ancient debris that, and you're still there trying to, put together your set of diamond tools. So the thing about single player is that you can play everything at your own pace. It avoids you getting burnt out on the game if you want to stay committed to it, to just measure out that pace over a longer period of time, and also avoids you getting burnt out on an update quite so early, because you spend a lot of time just working towards very specific goals instead of having your server mates race to get to that stuff. You can play single player for ages without killing the Ender Dragon, but then on a server, people are going to want to kill the Ender Dragon pretty quickly because it means access to shulker boxes, and that's a vital part of other people's play styles. So I think there's a certain balance to be had there. And since leaving decidedly vanilla and multiplayer play in general, I have found myself learning so much more about the technical side of the game simply because I have to. And the depth of Minecraft is really kind of opening up to me in that way. Because I used to avoid redstone and stick to building, and there were other people on servers who would make iron farms and various contraptions and stuff for me. But now I'm a jack of all trades, and I feel like I'm getting more value out of the game as a result. I have a much greater understanding of stuff like redstone and mob spawning mechanics and just how Minecraft works under the hood, because there's nobody around to build an iron farm for me, and I have to do it myself. So that's what I get out of single player, really. And I could go back to playing multiplayer if the right thing came along, and if I didn't have the survival guide to think about. I don't want to put too much time into 2 vanilla series at once, because I feel like I would be giving 50% of my effort to both instead of giving it my all on one series that I was really excited about, which is what I do right now with the survival guide. And yeah, I feel like that my jam is single player right now, and that might change in future. I don't think it's such a huge change to make that happen, but I think it's just a matter of what's around you, what you have access to, and the single player game in Minecraft is incredibly deep if you want to get that far into it.
One last point before we wrap things up. I think that you can also control that yourself to a certain extent in terms of whether you or not you want to keep pace with everybody else. Stephen, one of the server mates on the Citadel, has been away for a while and he's back. But as he's been away for a year or more, like he's behind in terms of if he looks at it too broadly, he feels like he hasn't accomplished much. But that's the thing about the server, is that you can play however you want. So there are certain things that he's not using. He's not using certain farms that we have because he feels like he wants to, as you mentioned, learn how that mechanic works in the game, decide whether it's worth it for him to build his own, or be just like, this isn't fun, / I don't have this much time. I'm just going to go to Joel's farm that he says I can use and get the stuff that I need. And I think that's great because it means that, for servers that have time constraints, because let's face it, Minecraft is a time intensive game, no matter which way you play it. You can choose to play at your own pace depending on the community. And then if you need to, or if you're just like, oh, I just don't have time this week, I really need these hoppers and I just don't have the time to grind for iron, then you can go and use the modern iron farm or whatever that maybe you didn't build yourself, but it can kind of get you up to speed as you see fit. And there's a wonderful gray area with Minecraft in that you can really kind of play it however you want. But with time constraints, that's what keeps me from going back to a single player. I think personally, from an artistic and a creative side of things, I would like a single player. What I don't like is I've invested 3 years in a server and I have all the things that I need at my fingertips. I don't want to go back to square one. I just it's because I would just get frustrated. It's like, my block palette is now 4 things.
Yeah, you're like, I have to build with oak wood again. Are you kidding me?
Exactly. And so that's what restrains me. It's not that I don't like the single player aspect. It's just a time investment. And I think I've said a number of times before, either on this podcast or on my own streams, where if I was to go do a single player, I would want it to be very different. Like I did a short Skyblock series. I would maybe invest single player into a modded series just because I've never played modded for any length of time or seriously, because for the same reasons that you are getting so much out of your survival guide Let's Play, I would learn a lot of modded if I had to do it all myself. Like if I just committed to single player modded for a while, I would have to learn all the different mods that are popular and I would have to sort that out. And I can't do that just from reporting on it week to week. But that's the only reason that I would do a single player, because it would be ultimately, like you said, dividing my time between the Citadel and something else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been a very full mailbag this week, and thank you all so much for those emails. You can, of course, send them in to the usual address, which Joel will have for you in a second. But that is going to be it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and things, links to some of the things we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. Even more proud this week because we have a bunch of new folks joining the community. Thank you all so much for stopping in. If you get some value out of the show, you can consider putting some value back in at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. That will get you into our community. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat and gets you listening in to the show live as we record it. We've recorded this entire episode live in Discord with a bunch of our patrons listening in. Our next goal is to do this more regularly, but have a monthly Minecraft audio hangout with our patrons. Just a private thing that will probably go up on the Patreon RSS feed afterwards, and it's just going to be us shooting the breeze with the people in the chat and kind of getting their feedback on what they've been doing in Minecraft lately. Effectively, an extended version of the quick login that we do, but with community involvement in the text chat, and we can discuss what everyone's been up to lately. So if that sounds like your jam, join up on Patreon and get us closer to our next milestone goals. We currently have 194 patrons, which is another increase from last week, but there is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineers, Cameron Segelski, Greener Canuck, JD Williamson, Yakov Nastin, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram, but a personal recommendation is by far the best way to share the podcast with your friends. Poke a friend in the arm and say, hey, you should listen to this. It's a cool podcast. The email for the show is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. You can subscribe for free on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. Please leave us a star rating on the Apple Podcast app. It's a great way for listeners to discover the podcast. People are just out there looking for Minecraft podcasts. They'll find it the better it's reviewed. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where I attempt to make sense of this crazy and wonderful game in a series called the Minecraft Survival Guide. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where the ancient debris pile is ever growing right now. It's all behind the scenes work for the Survival Guide series. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can just drop me a line through the website there if you're interested in talking about a project. The Citadel Cafe is my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. That has had a couple weeks off, but we're back tomorrow. I'm recording with Megan. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's at thecitadelcafe.com. And of course, you can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream pretty regularly. I want to say about 3 times a week myself.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but the mail still gets delivered.